All right, so I finally gotten around to talking about this film. It's a really good film. It's from 1931. It's a German film, based during, shot during, released during the Weimar Republic. It lasted from 1918 or 1919, depending on how you define it, when Germany was defeated in the First World War, when their empire collapsed, until 1933, when Hitler became chancellor. A very interesting part of German history that not too many people really know about or talk about, read about, but it's basically a period in German history that's kind of like at least I refer to it, or think of it as a sort of Pax Romana period, but it was, for the most part, it did have some successful years to it. It became a democratic republic, very democratic by the standards of those days. The head of state was democratically elected, and he had to answer to the parliament, the Reichstag. And in democratic countries, this is very important because you want checks and balances. You don't want anyone to have too much power. Historians generally divide this era into about three sections. We tend to say that the first era was between the years 1919 to 1923, or maybe 1924, again, depending on how you define it. And this is when the Republic had to contend with the immediate consequences of the war. Hyperinflation, as well as numerous subversive attempts and political murders of biblical proportions. I mean, you had the fascists and the communists just really at each other. But yeah, this did go on. I mean, between those years, those four, it didn't look like this country was going in any kind of right direction. It was really bad. But things started to quiet down in 1924. Things got stable. The moderates were successful at keeping both ends at bay and keeping complacency. There was stability also in their economy, and they became good trading partners with the rest of the world and didn't really cause much problems. This period saw a huge rise in arts, film, of course, books, things like cabaret, and it was a very liberal place during these 3-4 years. But the world economic crisis, of course, which started the Great Depression in 1929, marked the end of that period into the Weimar Republic's third and final phase. The Grand Coalition, the cabinet, and everything, they all just dissolved and became much weaker. People didn't trust because of a lack of public trust, because they couldn't figure out how to solve these problems. And that gave rise to the National Socialists, of course, led by Hitler, and he took huge advantage of that, as a lot of bad people do. You take advantage of bad situations. Okay, I'm just going to jump right into it here. This movie takes place in Berlin, in a working class borough. We have a mother waiting for her daughter to return from school. And this is a very scary time for this neighborhood because there's a faceless person out there who's abducting, raping, and killing children. And the police, thumbs up their asses, can do absolutely nothing about it. So, yeah, the mother's daughter is his latest victim at the start of this movie. This creates a very charged atmosphere that still exists to this day, especially in countries like us, all the countries in Europe, Canada, etc., that's sort of causing most, if not all the town, to sink into madness because due to all the fear, frustration, and incompetent police force that doesn't seem to be serving them well. Like the Salem witch trials or the McCarthyist era of the United States, we have many, many people out of hysteria pointing at each other. What we come to see is a town that even the criminal underground has an interest in capturing this guy. His terrorizing the neighborhood not only is interfering with their business, but these people, no matter immoral background, have wives and kids themselves, so they even step in and help.
The police basically just fishnet the whole town, seeing who they can catch, not knowing what else to do. The public's demand for justice is something they can't ignore no longer. It's not possible at all. And of course, this leads them nowhere closer to catching the actual culprit. I'm not going to talk about the actual culprit because that will kind of ruin the film, I think, if you're watching it for the first time. And I assume that most of the people in this video probably haven't seen the film. But one of the things about this film that really surprised me was its frank attitude towards the subject of a person who's a child molester and rapist and killer. what Fritz Lang did here in this film was he took an actual social concern, an actual social problem, and presented it in a very frank way. A problem that he felt was very rampant in the Weimar Republic. And I'm not just talking about crimes like child molesters, but there is, of course, the issue of vigilantism. Is it okay to act outside the law? Because in this movie, you clearly can see the police not doing anything about it. Now, if that is completely reflective of how the police were in the Weimar Republic, it's kind of hard to say. I don't think I can really say, but this is clearly an issue that Lang is addressing in this film. With vigilantism, there are no rules. They can do pretty much whatever they want to whoever they want. There's no due process with vigilantism. And as you see here in this film, these vigilantes, a lot of them are part of the Berlin underworld. Most of them confessed criminals themselves, see themselves as having a moral high ground over this child molester. And I'm sure most people would agree. We see that a lot on the internet, on YouTube.
You're here today, please.
We see people, a lot of them felons, taking it upon themselves to hunt down a lot of pedophiles and of course claiming a moral high ground over them. Do such men have the moral high ground over these pedophiles, and do they have the right to do what they do?
When men start taking the law into their own hands, they're just zapped in all the confusion and fun to start hanging somebody who's not a murderer as somebody who is. And the next thing you know, they're hanging one another just for fun. Till it gets to a place a man can't pass a tree or look at a rope without feeling uneasy. We seem to lose our heads in times like this.
The police turn to the relatively modern science of fingerprinting analysis and the not-so-science of graphology. Although they seem to be right on a few things here about the guy's profile, they just aren't able to catch him. The credit for that goes to the aforementioned criminal underworld. But, as I've said a couple of times already, this is a good film, and it does really make you think about it. I mean, I just try to imagine somebody in 1931 watching a film like this, watching this kind of a topic at play on the big screen. This film, of course, was shown on both sides of the Atlantic, and was probably shown in its full over here, because this is a pre-code film, so the Hays Committee was not yet in function and was not able to scrutinize certain parts of it. So, lastly, I'll just mention that this film is in the public domain, and it is in HD, and you can watch it for free on YouTube in the provided link below. So, thanks for watching, thanks for listening.